Hi, I'm Susan Booth. I'm the Jennings Hertz Artistic Director of the Alliance Theater.
And I'm Mike Schleifer. I'm the Managing Director of the Alliance Theater.
So, big picture, we do 11 shows a season, and the process of building a season tends to be a iterative one, right? So, as soon as we've got one that we've really landed on, everything else is contextualized, right? So that one is going to speak to this particular population, or it's going to wrestle with this particular topic. So now what sits in conversation with that? In a lot of theaters where you have an artistic director and a managing director, there is a kind of parallel universe structure. Art, commerce. I would like to believe we work a little differently.
Yes, but you obviously do have a season in mind that you think works really well, obviously. And then we put the burden of dollars and time against that. And sometimes there's very little that has to change. And sometimes, like in this current pandemic year, there's quite a bit that has to change. And that's where I really enjoy our collaboration. I enjoy just the transparency with each other as we sort of wrestle a season into a budget.
And it is, rather than here are all 11 of those titles, it's a rolling conversation. So here's this behemoth that I'm obsessed by, discuss, right? Here is an artist that we've been working with, and I think his or her piece is going to be ready for next year. Implications.
Right.
But let's talk about a couple. But a couple big picture frames that just seem useful. Is this thing, right? A play is a stew of component parts. There's the what, which is what's a narrative about. There's the who. Is this an artist that we think is really exciting and contemporary in the best sense of the word? And then there's the how. And some work is wonderfully, rigorously intellectual and cool, right? Some work is very heart-centered and wonderfully emotionally messy, right? And I think what we've come to consensus around is the work that's been the most right for our audience is the work that starts there, then goes there, not vice versa. It doesn't live singularly in one place or the
That's
other,
right.
but it comes from the heart first. What's a first show that you saw when you came to the Alliance? Do you remember?
Well, the first show I saw as a candidate was A Christmas Carol, which gave me a sense of the scale of what the Alliance could do. Certainly, I knew so much of the Alliance's history before I got there, and learned a lot more when I was interested in the position. This is going back almost 7 years now. But a show that terrified me early on in my tenure was Natasha Trethewey's Native Guard. Right. So this is the American Poet Laureate, Pulitzer Prize winning piece of poetry called Native Guard. And you said, we're going to make it into a play. And this is my first season. And I thought, well, but it's not a play. And so I said, okay. So I got on the phone with the licensor, this guy who represents Natasha Trethewey. And I said, and of course we're gonna change it a bunch. And he said, well, that might be a problem. I said, okay, well, hold on. So I came back to you and I said, all right, I don't think we can do this because the licensor says we can't change any of the words, and it's a book of freaking poetry. And you said, no, I want to do it from the first word to the last word unchanged. It's a beautiful piece and it should not be messed with. So tell me, I mean, how did that play evolve in your head before it was in our season?
The thing that I love most about this art form that we traffic in is its capacity to occasion really necessary conversation, right? And that can be a conversation that we need to have with ourselves to figure ourselves out a little bit better because we're, God, messy beings. it can be conversations that we need to have so that we can live in community as something other than misanthropists, right? Current American moment, right? And so when a collection of words comes my way that feels like it has the capacity to crack people open, then I'm drawn by that collection of words, and I want to figure out the how of moving that collection of words into a larger conversation with this community of ours, right? And so when Native Guard won the Pulitzer, I'm a big poetry geek. I got a copy, and it's a horrible thing to admit, I was only about 3 poems in out of 20 when this was a decision, right? You have to commit to something being a good idea until you discover that it's a bad idea.
Yes.
Because if you waffle, then you infuriate everyone around you, but also you betray your best instincts. Anyway, so I knew it was something that could occasion a conversation in Atlanta that Atlanta seemed to need and want to have. So that made it a good idea.
Yeah, and that show got through to people in a way that very few do. I mean, to get back to that, I mean, that entered your heart before you even understood it had happened. It was abstract. It was different. It was not linear. We got to the end of it, and it was such a special piece. And then, you know, when you think about it from a, you know, the manager side, right, the commerce side, you think, okay, well, this show's not going to sell any tickets. It's a book of poetry, right? And damn if it didn't. But the other thing that we think about at the theater is, you know, we have 2 big revenue sources, right? The earned money, ticket sales, and the contributed money. When people feel like we're doing something right, they support us. And that show garnered a lot of support. Enough so, and it left such an impression, and it touched so many people's hearts and expanded their hearts and minds so much that we did it again. And it had the exact same impact. It was still remarkably timely.
You said something that I think is really, really important, which is about the abstraction of the piece. So there are fantastic, wonderful pieces of theater that do all the work for you, right? And they can be so satisfying, right? You show up and you're going to be entertained, and great writers and great performers and great designers are going to take you by the hand and lead you through an evening, right? Awesome. But in the case of Native Guard particularly, if in fact you want to engage in a complicated discussion, then you have to be vulnerable and you have to show up. Work that has and leaves space and demands presence from its viewers, right? Because you have to step in there and work to make connective sense.
Right. Well,
and Native Guard demanded that.
That's right. And I think that is what our audience demands. I think there is a large part of our constituency that really loves to be challenged by the work and fill in some of those blanks and lean forward in their seats. Now, let me ask you a question. What Native Guard played to 200 people each night. And, you know, we have another stage that seats a lot more, and we do some bigger work. What's one of your favorite at sort of the other end of the production spectrum?
Well, what's funny is, in a way, they're radically different shows because there's an immediate answer to that. A common denominator between the show I'm about to name and Native Guard is music. So Aristotle in the Poetics talked about spectacle and the fact that, and he meant music, but poetry has a rhythm and a cadence to it that is musical, right? Shakespearean verse, right? Musical. And Aristotle was kind of smart, because what he realized happened when you're in audience with rhythm and music is that you turn off the judgmental, bias-laden part of your gray matter, right? And you get viscerally involved. Your heart rate changes, your breathing changes. When you're in that state, shit can happen, right? And you could actually, this is crazy pants, you could get your mind changed because your defenses are down. So obviously, the logical thing for a theater that does Native Guard to do is the prom. But
Yes.
there were many, many, many things about the prom that I loved madly. But I think the thing that just stirred me so deeply every time I was in the rehearsal hall, every time I was at a reading, every time I watched that show on stage, is that an audience of people with all kinds of views were rooting like crazy for this young woman to be a girl to prom and have a slammingly good
That's
time.
right. That's right.
If that story had been told as a polemic, let's talk about rights, nope.
I found yes to everything you said. The prom was wildly entertaining. The finest Broadway caliber dancers, actors, singers, director, choreographer, designers. I mean, the best in the world worked on that show, and it had all of the entertainment check boxes. Great songs, great dancing, all of it, and then you were tricked into this fantastic social justice message, right? You were crying and you didn't even know you were crying. It's almost the opposite as a patron member. If I was a subscriber to the Alliance, which I am in a way, and I would think on some level, I'm going to go see a Pulitzer Prize piece of poetry performed as a stage play. This is going to be my cultural medicine, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to drink it. And I would go there and I would watch it, and I would be shocked to find out how entertained. I knew I was going to go in and think, but damn, I was so entertained. And the prom, I went into thinking, I'm going to be so entertained. It's going to be so much fun. And then I'm crying, and I'm ready to write a letter to my congressman about LGBT rights, and that is what makes that show so special. I think the joys of getting to work in a regional theater is getting to serve a community. But so much commercial work, which we've touched from time to time, we do these commercially enhanced work like the prom that moved to Broadway and had a very successful run, are sort of obligated to play to the lowest common denominator, right? And what I love about Atlanta, what I love about the programming that you come up with at the Alliance is we can be in service to our specific, we do not have to dumb it down to the lowest of the country. We can actually elevate it to the smartest of our city. And that just makes the work so much more satisfying and interesting.
I love that, and I keep going back season after season to this great list that John Jory published in American Theater Magazine after founding and running Actors Theater Louisville for close to 3 decades. He wrote a piece, and it was just a list, and it had 52 things on it, and they were 52 things that he had learned from running a theater. And the one that I go back to over and over again is don't do a Boston season in Boise or vice versa.
That's right. That's right.
And I didn't know what that meant when I encountered it at first, because he wrote it a bunch of years ago. But the reason that Alliance is an exporter as opposed to an importer is because we think Atlanta deserves work that's made for them, right? And that doesn't mean that there's not great stuff in New York that might be really resonant with an Atlanta audience. And there are times, I am so proud of our production of Disgraced. We're in conversation with the Muslim community, and that was a brilliant vehicle that Ayar Akhtar wrote to occasion that, right? And so that was a case where we imported something that this isn't self-congratulatory, this is on the play. That was the perfect piece to occasion that conversation in Atlanta. But I do think, God forbid, there's a cookie cutter template of, okay, we need one of these, one of these, one of these, that's interchangeable with theaters in Connecticut and California.
That's right. Now, let me ask you one question. When you think about some of the shows that we've talked about, right, the Prom and Native Guard and Disgrace, how do you put them all together in the same season? Are there boxes that you check, that does this have to be one of these and one of these? Even if it is specific to Atlanta, what makes it an Alliance season?
Yeah. So back in the days when we were in offices, as you'll recall, there are those giant whiteboards in my office, and I keep a running list of Coca-Cola stage scale projects, Hertz stage scaled projects, and just weird ass anomalies that maybe they're going to be shows, maybe they're going to be engagement initiatives. I don't know what they're going to be, or maybe they're just artists that I want us to have relationships with. And as things stay in conversation for a while, they go up on that board, and as more than one starts to assemble, you think about, okay, how much of Atlanta am I talking to? Or we talking to, right? And who aren't we talking to yet that we're going to miss their voices in our annual dialogue, right? I like dinner parties, right? Because my husband cooks. But what I love about a dinner party is assembling a group of people that you just know you are going to be sitting around that table 4 hours later having fantastic conversation. And part of that is what bumps up against what, and making sure that you've got as radically diverse a group of voices and ideas as possible. And so I think each season is sort of a dinner party, right? So you want to make sure that you've got variances in tone. On my Hertz whiteboard, at the side of each board, I have sort of things to remember about the space. It's me reminding me, right? And one of the things on the Hertz board says, it has a circle with a line through it, bummer in the basement. Because it's such a gorgeous, intimate space, and you can have really great, crunchy conversation. But if everything down there leaves you walking out of the theater despairing for the sake of humanity, not so much. So tonal variance, cohort variance, who are we talking to? And I have my friend Mike Schleifer who look at, no, actually 6 shows in a row with cast of 15 is probably not going to happen in a single season. So there's that kind of dynamic.
Right.
And it's, you also have to make sure that the artists that are being given voice, that you're thinking about equity, you're thinking about inclusion, not just thinking about it, right? If I do a full PMS season, which is my new favorite acronym, which is the Pale Male Stale season, not so much, right?
Right.
So all that.
Yeah, well, I agree. You know, as an older white dude, I'm kind of bored with my story. I'm actually much more interested in hearing somebody else's. So it is actually an oasis to get to hear the variety of stories that the Alliance tells, and you do a remarkable job of curating.
Well, and let's finish with well-deserved Kumbaya Your Way, which is, you said, you know, we veer into each other's lanes. We do regularly, often, and I am grateful for it, because you will ever not argue back. And you're often my first litmus test on provokes. Even if it provokes, what are you, high? Then that's worth paying attention to. And it also starts the conversation of, how's this going to land on an audience?
That's right. That's right.
I think this is where we say thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's a joy.
Bye.
Bye.